Hello and welcome. This is Kelly Fitzpatrick from RedMonk with another What is How-To video. My guest today is Chris. And Chris, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Chris Sterling. I'm with VMware, and my role is a senior product line manager, mostly focused around API management. And I'm part of the Spring organization within VMware.
Excellent. Well, thanks for being here today. Today, we're going to be talking a lot about APIs, and our topic for today is what is a distributed API gateway and how to get started with Spring Cloud Gateway for Kubernetes. And I have to say, distributed API gateway is not a term that I think I have heard very often. So I'm very much looking forward to what you have to say on the topic.
Yeah, definitely getting started there. You can think about a distributed gateway as kind of attending to the cloud needs, right? So you have a cloud native infrastructure now, you've got Kubernetes, you've even got Tanzu application service built on Cloud Foundry. In these kind of scenarios, you're probably not going to always have a centralized point to manage everything from. So what you need to be able to do is distribute and then aggregate. And so we'll talk about that as what we are trying to help developers do with API gateways.
Excellent. And maybe in the process, we'll just kind of coin a new phrase.
So kind of getting started here with the why do we need an API gateway in the first place. I kind of talked through what many of the enterprises that we talk to go through. They've been building application services for many years in different languages. Even within the Java virtual machine, there are many languages and different frameworks that they've used, JEE, Spring 4 versus Spring 5. There's a lot going on there. And of course, with the onboarding of things like Node.js and .NET Core, it's even going further out. So with that, what has also happened and transpired is there's a lot of cross-cutting concerns that are handled across all these different frameworks and different languages, such as single sign-on and just web security in general, whether or not it be protocols and standard differences, all the way from XML web services to REST. We're seeing quite a bit of difference in these application services. And of course, now the consumers who are consuming the APIs off those application services have to deal with all those differences.
And so it sounds like there's just a lot of API sprawl to kind of deal with, both within an organization and maybe even within even single parts of an organization.
Definitely. And even if you're sharing with partners or others, now it's become kind of this point-to-point solution all over the place and potentially hard to detangle. So what we're trying to do here is provide the Spring Cloud Gateway for Kubernetes product to help with that API consumption. One of the things we want to do is remove some of those cross-cutting concerns out of the application code, thus reducing the number of times it's potentially duplicated. And also probably there's some differences between them which causes some errors. And then on top of that, we want to make the user experience from the consumer point of view of APIs consistent across all of your user base. And we've already had this product in Spring Cloud Gateway for VMware Tanzu on Tanzu Application Service for many of our customers who are based on Cloud Foundry. And now we're bringing this to any Kubernetes. On top of that, one of the major things that we really wanted to tackle for many of the enterprises that we talked to was security. Sometimes when using API management and API gateway tools that are on the market today, they expose their application services directly, usually using some kind of SaaS integration. And then they have to put some kind of networking layers in between, such as firewalls and such, and load balancers to manage the traffic and try to secure the traffic. So what we do is we're trying to put the gateway closer to the actual code that's running, the application service itself, or at least within the same network. And what that allows us to do is then start leveraging the platforms that we're on, such as Tanzu Application Service and Kubernetes, to do container networking and secure those communications.
Yeah, and from what I know of say developers, for instance, security is something that is not always kind of front of mind. So anytime they're working with something that is kind of somewhat taking care of security for them in some ways, that is a plus.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the things being an enterprise application developer, a lot of times you've got pressure on releases and business functionality. And then to add on security and networking and all these kind of things, it's really hard to try to put that all into one box and get your releases out the door. So we try to make that easy for them.
Yeah, and absolutely. Networking and security are things that not everyone has expertise in that as well.
Right. It's a whole thing that you have to focus on yourself. So that's why we introduced Spring Cloud Gateway for Kubernetes. It's the developer-friendly way to route, secure, and monitor API requests to services. And the developer friendliness, I'm going to show you in a bit, but the idea here is that we're providing a solution out of the box you can deploy on any Kubernetes. You can connect it to your enterprise identity provider for single sign-on, and then all requests that can be authorized through that single sign-on experience. We also have some OSS route configuration options with what are called predicates and filters, and we'll show later. And those are expanded in the commercial product with some additional route configuration options. We also have the ability to support any kind of application that's out there behind the gateway, as long as it talks HTTP. So polyglot application service support is a main focus of ours, making sure everyone can play in this pool. And then on top of that, we have some of our customers, I'll talk about in a little bit, the use case of having to access external services. Most of the time this is happening in an application modernization effort, but also we've seen this with maybe you're using some SaaS services out there and you're exposing them through your APIs as well. Okay. So let's talk about some of those use cases that we're trying to tackle and what we've seen in the API gateway market. One of them is internal API sharing, and we see this as much less served in our market currently. That a lot of people are making their own solutions for this, and so we wanted to make this a part of our product and easy to do. So one of the things that we've seen is, let's say we have an example here. We have the agent line of business and we have the fraud line of business. Let's say it's an insurance company of some kind. And in there, they have the agent LOB, which agents are logging into. They might have an agent portal here. It's sitting behind our Spring Cloud Gateway. And when they log in through that portal, the session is managed in the gateway, and they're authorized to certain APIs via that. Now, when they make a consumer request API call, then that consumer request API is in the background going to call the fraud line of business Spring Cloud Gateway instance. So this is that distributed nature. All of a sudden, each of us can have our own gateways with our own security policies. Maybe they're in the fraud division, they're using client certificates or MTLS, some kind of thing other than single sign-on. And then we're accessing the fraud detection API with an authorized access token. And that is going to fraud data services. This might be Spring Cloud data flow or something like that in behind the scenes, and checking on whether or not we should allow this request. So this is kind of your internal API sharing. We're working with each other across lines of businesses.
And I love this example, and I love how you talk about it, you kind of being distributed even within a single organization or enterprise. Because from what I've seen, the lines of business or even different teams in a single enterprise often have, apps and tech that kind of grow organically and are not necessarily initially ready to talk to each other in this way.
Well, not only that, it's also very cool from an enterprise architecture point of view. All of a sudden, I could start to kind of think about all of my API sources in a single way, think about them in a kind of a similar governance policy point of view. So I think that this definitely can help with the overall enterprise being an API economy. Yeah. So on top of that, there's the application modernization use case, and we have some customers doing this today where they have an application running on a virtual machine. They might even have an application running on a virtual machine fronting a COBOL app on a mainframe. There are lots of different variations of this. But one of the things they might want to do in that agent portal is do a loan request, and that's using that somewhat older application, a heritage application like we like to call it. And maybe it's a monolith and it has a lot of different endpoints on it. One of the things we wanted to support is for you to be able to create what's called an API route configuration around those endpoints on the loan request application monolith, and then put that on the Kubernetes cluster as a route configuration that the gateway can apply. And now all of the requests come through the gateway. It kind of is that shim layer in between you and the loan request itself. And that loan request API now is served through the gateway. What this allows you to do is that later on, you can start to work on the loan request application to maybe slice off some of the data and refactor the application to provide smaller services on the platform, maybe extend those for better value for your organization, also just modernizing it, making sure you're up to support needs in compliance.
Yeah, and this is a use case I feel that many organizations can relate to.
Yeah, we're seeing it all over the place. There's a lot of our customers, they've been around for a long time. They're gonna have a lot of these applications running out there. Yeah. And then there's a third one, which is more of you're exposing to external consumers. And this is situations where either you're actually a company that has APIs that the public can use. It may be a situation where you have partner portals or things like that you're providing. And so in this case, you usually want to have a very distributed nature to the overall load balancing of your APIs. And you might have a global load balancer or edge services that are fronting those. On top of that, you're deploying across multiple AZs. You might have the same exact APIs across those. And then we're able to handle the session management with your identity provider and then collect all the metrics in the background. We have a metrics emitter using micrometer underneath Spring Boot that then can push that to different observability tools and also be able to be collected elsewhere so that you can do things like billing if you wanted to for your API consumption needs. Yeah. So kind of what is the developer experience? And when we talk about developer, we try to separate out a couple of different players in this realm. There is the application operator and DevOps developer, and they tend to have different goals in mind. They're really trying to support the system underneath the enterprise, right? And so they might be managing resources that are being deployed into your environment, different topologies. And one of those is an API gateway. So in this case, we have what's called a Spring Cloud Gateway Custom Resource. And the Spring Cloud Gateway Custom Resource has some configuration about how you want to optimize this particular gateway for its use case. And when you apply this to your cluster and you tell it which namespace to put it in this case, the animal rescue namespace, it'll create a brand new gateway instance within that namespace. Now, on top of that, you have the application developer, and they're working on the other side of this. They're thinking about how their APIs are going to be used by users. And so they're managing what's called an API route config. And the API route config is a Spring Cloud Gateway Route Config custom resource. And this can actually live with their code. So you can imagine actually having this in your Git repository. And then being able to test it locally because we provide the images that you can then run inside like a kind cluster on VMware Fusion. You can all run that locally and test out, is my API route configuration doing what I expect it to do for the users I'm providing these services to? And you can apply this again into the animal rescue namespace as an example, and that will be just sitting there waiting because it doesn't have any reference to any gateway yet. There's a third custom resource that we provide, which is called a mapping object. And a Spring Cloud Gateway mapping object really takes a reference of a route config and maps it to a gateway. And this is somebody deciding that this gateway should have these API routes, or I should change out the API routes for this service with these new ones. And that means there's a way for the application operators to have control and make sure that the wrong APIs do not get into this gateway. And the nice thing about this is you can start to put some things around this in your processes, like validating the APIs. You might even have some tools, and we're going to be providing some of those tools later on that allow you to validate the API itself, whether or not it meets your needs.
Yeah, and I really like how you have kind of addressed almost like the separation of concerns in terms of, who cares about what parts of this and that, and who actually has kind of control over it. And it just seems to take a lot of kind of worry away from folks regarding the things that they don't necessarily care about, but someone else has to.
Yeah, and one of the other things is just removing the friction that we've seen in
Yes.
many of our customers around updating an API gateway. If it's centralized resource, then a lot of times there's a ticketing system and a process in there. We've heard, days and weeks to get APIs updated, and you can't test it locally. So this is nice. You can actually, even the application developer can run the map route config, map the route config to their local gateway instance. They can do all that locally, while in production and staging systems, maybe they're more controlled.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then we're going to talk about an animal rescue sample. I've already been kind of alluding to this so far, but I want to kind of give you a little idea of what it is. So you've got these potential pet adopters, and they're going to go to this website, and I'm going to launch that website in just a moment. I'm going to show you actually deploying the animal rescue sample app based upon some of the things you've already seen. In front of, I'll be creating what's called a contour ingress. And this ingress is going to be on Kubernetes, and it's going to be fronting my gateway only. So it's just it's an ingress for the gateway, giving us an IP address and that we can go to. And then the gateway is going to be fronting and mapped to a front end and a back end set of APIs. And the front end APIs are really to support launching the web browser application. And then the back end is the actual APIs. You can imagine these are in separate repos, but in our sample app, they're in the same repo today as different folders. And this will also be connected to an enterprise identity provider. In this case, I'm using Auth0 just for the purposes of showing it off, that we can do it with the SaaS providers out there. So that's kind of a look around at the use case that we're doing.
All right. It sounds like it is now demo time.
It is demo time, and let the demo gods be with us. All right. So I've got my animal rescue sample application, which, by the way, you can go and see online already. It's actually available. Obviously, you don't have the Kate's Spring Cloud Gateway for Kubernetes yet, so you'll have to install that. But once it's available to you, then you can try this out. And the way that we currently are running the deployment of all the mapped, all the custom resource files is through a customized build. And what Customize is going to do is going to actually create the gateway demo. It's going to put all the SSL credentials secret in place. It's going to launch the backend and the front end applications, map their route configs over to the gateway. It does all of that for us in the background. And if I do a kubectl get all, and I watch for that, you'll see that resources are starting to be deployed and containers are being deployed. The gateway demo, in this case, we actually have done a count of 2 instances so that it will, once it's up and running, the gateway demo will actually have 2 instances. You'll see pretty soon here a new pod come up called gateway demo-1. And you'll also see a stateful set at the bottom. And what we're doing here is we're using an in-memory data grid in order to support the gateway demo instances as shared session information. So if you log into one and then you're sent to the other one, they both have the same information, so you're still logged in, as an example. This also is for rate limiting as well. So if you provide a rate limit throttling for an API endpoint, the rate limiting will be applied across all instances. Okay. And it looks like we're about to be up and running. Now, one of the things that we don't have here, and I want to make sure that we put in place, is an ingress. So in this case, I'm going to use Contour. So I have a Contour YAML that I apply to the overall. And if I do an ingress, you'll notice I have an IP address now, and we're ready to go. So then let's go over to our browser. You notice earlier the application wasn't there. All of a sudden, we've launched the application. It's running on Kubernetes now, yay. We're running on TKGI, which is one of the VMware products that creates Kubernetes clusters. And if I log in, you'll notice I get sent over to Auth0. I'm going to go ahead and use my Google account. And after I log in, it'll take a couple seconds just because of the API calls in the background, but you'll see up here on the top right of the browser, you'll see it says, have a cute day. And it gives me actually a big long subject ID. That's just a matter of our animal rescue app and how it works with Auth0 and Google. You'll notice that now these adopt buttons are available. And I see I really like Chocobo, so I'm going to go ahead and say cute. I'll apply that. This is calling the backend API. So this is the front end calling the backend APIs now through the gateway, all of it sharing the same session. I can update it again, saying something like that. I'll apply. And then also I can, you know what, I want to adopt a different pet. I saw a different one. So all of that is working through the APIs, and I can sign out. I come back out, and now it's saying I need to sign in again, and everything's grayed out. So that's kind of an example of animal rescue using single sign-on, using our APIs. It actually is using the Rockfig. Everything is being mapped just as we had described in the presentation.
And it seems like the demo gods were in fact with us today. I feel like in part because the end goal was to have some like cute kitties and doggos up on the screen.
Of course. All right. And then kind of to end this off, I wanted to describe kind of the characteristics of a developer-friendly distributed API gateway. And you know, like you said, maybe we're coining a term, but it's also just describing kind of what we're trying to provide to our customers. One of the things that we've seen is centrally managed API gateways tend to have no direct access for developers, and therefore there's usually a back and forth that has to go on through a ticketing system. So what we want to make sure is that the developer is able to work on the API route configuration lifecycle, because it's going to evolve over time, and be able to do that on the team themselves. On top of that, we also, from a deployment pattern standpoint, we a lot of times see that ticketing systems as a way to deploy your releases. And what we want to see is actually a SDLC aligned approach, meaning that your continuous integration, continuous delivery friendly with your API route configuration changes. So we should be able to actually automate this process all the way through the pipeline out to the Spring Cloud Gateway instances. On top of that, security, single sign-on being one of those things, we want to really simplify how security is handled. And we take an opinionated approach, but configurable. And so we, you know, single sign-on is one of those things that we're working on. We currently have OIDC support. We'll have LDAP and SAML as well. And those are the kind of things that we want to make really simple for our users to use. And then on top of that, rather than having to expose our services to SaaS providers or maybe outside of where we would like to, I'd like to secure those services using container networking and make sure we have things like MTLS all the way through.
Well, that is great, and I especially appreciate this kind of comparison of the centralized versus distributed API gateway at the end after we got to see the demo. So it kind of helps us kind of categorize and get some takeaways for what we actually saw. So this has been another What Is How To. Chris, thank you very much for being here today and for such a great demo.
Well, thank you very much. It's been fun.